And reporter, would you like to start by saying who you are, why you started all this, what led you to start the campaign?
Well, I'm the co-director of the Convention on Modern Liberty, and I started it with Anthony Barnett. We've been meeting as a group for about 3 years, various lawyers and journalists and writers and so forth. And when David Davis left the House of Commons last year and said that he was resigning his seat in protest of 42 days, a number of funding organisations came to us, particularly Anthony, who, because we'd been talking, and we said, right, let's go for it. And we couldn't quite know what sort of discussion we wanted. Anthony wanted to sort of teach it. And my view was it should be much more political, much more opposed to the government, much more opposed to the trends that are going on.
Okay. When was that? You say it was three years?
It was actually, to give you the actual date, it was the 19th of June last year. No, 13th of June last year. And then we didn't really get going to September. And then we moved fairly rapidly after that.
And you made a presentation to Parliament, I believe.
Well, that was to the Joint Committee on Human Rights, who asked me to kind of express my worry about what the trends in British legislation were and the general slide of our stock of liberty and rights and privacy.
Thank you. What about the role of the journalist on this? I mean, how important is the journalist, would you say, in sort of...
Vital.
Defending rights?
Vital. Journalism is vital. The reputation of journalists is not good, but they are vital to the maintenance of a safe and healthy democracy, because only through journalists, through local newspapers and national newspapers, are officials made accountable. Without journalists, without these little newspapers and the big newspapers and the media generally, officials, and that means everything from the police to the health service to the planning authority or wherever, can get away with anything they want. So journalism is a vital part of our democracy. I think it was Thomas Jefferson who observed that you can have a democracy without journalists, or journalism without a democracy. He preferred the second.
Okay. And would you say, is the role of journalism in this respect under threat now? Is it becoming more difficult to sort of fulfill our function?
It's becoming difficult, but it's not impossible. And we should, the more we press, the more we resist, the more we make a noise about things, the more we focus on what is important, the easier it will become. The more we give in, the more we cower, self-censor, and walk away from very important stories, the more difficult it will become. It's essential that journalists have a sort of proper, functioning conscience which says, this is wrong, I must press for this story to go in the press or radio or whatever. It's important. That's the duty of the journalist. First duty of the journalist is to find the story, report it correctly, and get it into his or her medium.
So what would you say are our next steps? What can we do next?
Well, the next step, first of all, is to comprehend what's gone on, to understand in the last 2 decades maybe, but I think more particularly in the last decade, that there has been a very large attack on our stock of liberty. Particularly now, a threat is privacy. And without privacy, you can't have liberty. So first of all, it's to everyone to understand that there were some 55 laws passed by this government which attacked liberty, attacked each person's rights. They may not feel it, but it's there. That's the first thing. The second thing is I believe there should be much more education in schools of how we got to be the society we were. That's very, very important. Most people don't understand. There's been a vast number of immigrants and a vast exodus. And in that there has been a creation of a sort of generation and a very large body of people, a large percentage of the country who don't really understand British traditions in that way. This is not making any point about immigration. It's making a point about keeping the issue and the understanding and knowledge about liberty fresh and live in our society as a living part of each one of us. I think that's very important. And I also think that we now must move very sharply, first of all, to let the government know that there is a body of opinion which will resist these moves and these laws, and secondly, to persuade the opposition parties, in particular the Conservative Party, that this is something which is the most important issue. It may not rank high, as Jack Straw says in his constituent postbags, but who would expect it to? People who are facing great troubles with the economic situation. But that doesn't mean to say it isn't important. We shouldn't govern our politics by sort of focus group mentality. These things should be part of our conscience. And no politician with a conscience would say what Jack Straw said this week, that it didn't really matter because it wasn't in his constituency postbag.
Realistically, what would you say are the chances, how long would it take to roll back some of these rights grabs, if you like, that the government has?
Well, it's a lifelong struggle. I mean, you have to realise that without vigilance, liberty dies. So, it's not a project that's ended. You don't end it suddenly and say, right, we're going to go, we can all go to the football. What it is lifelong and purposeful vigilance, which first of all involves knowledge and secondly involves courage and determination. And that, is in the British people. One knows that. But it's also, the knowledge isn't, and that's a problem. And I think, David Davis says, there's a 10-year struggle. Well, I happen to disagree. I think there will be more and more threats as we go on into this century to individual liberty. And each generation has to fight that. And I'm most encouraged by the lessening of the average age in our meetings over the last 6 months. It's just dropped to the point last night when I was sitting in a room with about 20 individuals, all of whom were actually over 30 years younger than I am. Wow. So suddenly 21, 22-year-olds were discussing blogs between them, what was on Twitter, what was on Facebook, and it's just wonderful to pass on that responsibility and consciousness to a younger generation.
So do you think the Convention for Modern Liberty will continue in some other form? Will there be some sort of new movement, would you say?
I think it's a movement, not an organisation, so it's very ad hoc, and it relies on friendship and alliances which are built up. But we don't threaten any of the other organisations who are actually a bit defensive about this, but we're just going to continue as an ad hoc movement to build support and build. I think it's also the exchange of ideas, and one of the moving things about what's going on here is very senior members of the establishment talking to each other, not just to the audience, but actually exchanging ideas. So you've got Dominic Grieve from the Conservatives listening to Lord Bingham, who just listened to Lord Goldsmith, and them all nodding about the essential rights of habeas corpus during trial. But Lord Bingham, really did speak for what you might call the English-British conscience. It was an extraordinarily good speech.
Okay. Henry Porter, thank you.
Thank you.